All right, lesson 2, the important sliders in Lightroom. I've recorded this video like a bajillion times, but I think I'm getting a rhythm here. We're gonna talk about 2 things: properly exposing or normalizing your photo, and then also the idea that you need to have a good photo before you edit in Lightroom. We're gonna go to the second point. You do need to have a good photo before you edit in Lightroom. If your photo is overexposed or underexposed, these details that you have underexposed or overexposed can't be recovered from in Lightroom. So make sure you're getting properly exposed photos beforehand. And I'll talk about that in a different lesson. And then the second thing, normalizing your photos. The goal with these important sliders is to normalize your photos, which means making it look like it did in real life. So your camera has distortions that go on that we can fix. Your camera doesn't have the dynamic range of your eyeballs, which we can also fix. And your camera doesn't necessarily know what colors are white like our eyeballs do. We look at a piece of paper and we say it's white. That's not white. We look at a piece of paper and we say it's white. Our camera looks at a piece of paper and it says it's blue, it's yellow, it's pink, it's green. It doesn't get the colors right all the time, although it does do a really good job doing everything automatically. In general, if you set your camera to automatic all the way, it should do a really good job, and the only thing you would very likely have to fix is lens corrections. All right, so let's get into it. Opening up Lightroom, we got 2 photos that I want to work with. Photo number 1 is of me standing outside near this lighthouse. You can see that there's a lot of dynamic range here on the histogram, top right. On the histogram, you're seeing a record of all the pixels in your photograph. When you take a photo, your camera is capturing light and digitalizing it in the form of pixels. Those pixels are recorded on the histogram. On the far left of your histogram, you have black pixels. Next to that, you have shadows. Next to that, you have exposure or midtones. Next to that, you got highlights and then whites. You can adjust these specific pixels or these specific ranges of pixels by either clicking on the histogram and dragging, or going down below to these sliders here labeled the same as the names underneath the histogram tab. Okay, so to normalize your photo, we need to get a dynamic range that's similar to what we have with our eyes, which is crazy. You can't normally do that. So sometimes you end up with photos like this. This photo has some really dark areas. And when I was looking at this scene, those dark areas were visible. But then it also has some really bright areas. And these are honestly overexposed. You don't want this. But the main thing I want to point out is the dark areas. I took this photo in such a way that I preserved the detail in the bright areas, but there's enough details in the dark areas that I can increase the shadows here and get those details back. This is obviously a bad job. We're going to go over to something that will show more immediate and better results. This is a bad photo. Or is it? I properly exposed this photo and there aren't any clipped highlights. At least it doesn't appear like that. But it doesn't look all that good yet. And so the first thing that we have to do is we have to adjust the exposure for the photo. You see here that most of the pixels are on the far right, which means that they're in the whites range. If we move these pixels down into the midtones area or the exposure area and the shadows and blacks and highlights, then we're spreading the pixels out throughout the image, adding more depth. If your photo only has pixels in the whites, it's going to be a piece of paper. If your photo only has pixels that are in the blacks, it's going to be a black piece of paper. You want pixels throughout the whole histogram in order to have depth and detail. So to fix this image, we're just going to bring down all the sliders. That's right, all the sliders. And instantly you start to see a lot more detail in the photo, which is really good because you want the detail. The only issue that we have now, actually there's 2 issues, is the white balance and the lens distortion. So we're gonna adjust the white balance first. You can see that the image is a little bit too blue. And so if you're up here at the basics tab in Lightroom, you can adjust that temperature. That's what it's called. If it's too blue, the temperature's cool. If it's too yellow, the temperature is warm. I'm gonna move my temperature to about here. I think that looks relatively normal. And then I'm gonna adjust the tint to just a little bit pinker. Right there is good. If you're on field, you can get a proper white balance very easily. What you need is a 18% gray card. Again, that's not gray or white, but get the point. It's a piece of paper that you put in front of your camera, and then you set the white balance on your camera through manual settings. Basically, what it does is it tells your camera this is what 18% gray should look like, and thus white should look like this, and thus blue should look like this. Generally, the camera does it really good automatically, and Lightroom also does it fairly good automatically. But sometimes it doesn't do everything perfectly like it did in this image, but we fixed it. All right, last thing, we're gonna go down to this tab called Lens Corrections. My Lightroom's a little bit weird and a little bit different, but you should be able to get that. Lens corrections basically fixes the imperfections that your lens carries. So every lens is not perfect. There will be distortions, meaning it'll be extra wide or extra narrow, like a fisheye effect almost. And then there's also vignettes, but we can fix most of that here in Lightroom. If you click profile, you'll be able to do everything automatically. If you hit manual, it'll be manual, but I'm gonna stick to the profile tab. Here you got two checkboxes. If you hit the top checkbox, you are removing this thing called chromatic aberration, and it's better represented in this photograph here. Chromatic aberration is essentially when colors are bleeding off of the edges of specific details in your photograph. So here is an edge of a detail in my photograph, this wall. And you can see that it's going from gray to pink, purple to the sky. Sorry, need some water. But you can see the color change. That's chromatic aberration. And generally you can fix this by hitting remove chromatic aberration. You see the difference? It's trying to change it a little bit. It doesn't do the best here, so sometimes I go to manual and I adjust it here. The second thing is the lens distortions. You can also just hit check mark and boom, it removes the vignette, it removes the distortion. Very simple. I do it for all my photos. I think you should too. But this is how you normalize your photo, and it is the foundation, and it's absolutely essential before you start to manipulate the colors to add in your specific style, right? So make your photo look properly exposed, and then move on to lesson 3.